Chapter 16 looks at drug abuse and alcohol-related crimes. So when we look at illegal drugs in the United States, the legislation and the laws come from the Uniform Controlled Substance Act. This model identified illegal drugs. It was drafted and approved in 1970, but essentially whenever we look at a substance and whether or not it's controlled or illegal, and if there is a crime that's been committed, we would look at the Controlled Substances Act. So the verbiage of this act, whenever you read through it, and most states have adopted or have very few changes to the act, but when you look at the Controlled Substance Act, it makes it a crime to manufacture, possess, create, deliver any counterfeit substances, offer or agree to deliver any controlled substances, to just possess, intent to manufacture, knowingly keeping, maintaining, storing any controlled substances that are illegal, or to acquire or obtain possession of a controlled substance by misrepresentation, fraud, forgery, deception. So there are illegal drugs, right, such as cocaine, that really don't have any medical purpose, according to the Controlled Substances Act. But then you have other drugs like OxyContin who have a legitimate medical purpose in our society. So one is clearly illegal to have, but when does OxyContin become illegal? Well, that's when it becomes illegal when it truly doesn't belong to you. And so this Controlled Substance Act says you can't keep, store, have possession of something that is not yours if it's a controlled substance. So in short, what that means is your friend has surgery and has, a narcotic prescribed to them. Well, let's say you fall down and you hurt yourself. And you're like, well, I'll just take, my friend has leftover medication that I can have. No, what you've done there is you've crossed into an illegal drug transaction, really, because that controlled substance is truly that controlled. And that does not belong to you. So by taking that, even with your friend's permission, it is now an illegal drug. It's not yours. So that's what the Controlled Substance Act did. Outlined what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and then additionally, what also is a controlled substance. There are 5 schedules of controlled substances. Schedule 1 is the highest, Schedule 5 is the lowest. If you refer to your book on page 429, you'll be able to see that. But essentially, Schedule 1 drugs, which are the worst, would include heroin, LSD, hashish, marijuana, any sort of designer drug. So when we're talking about Schedule 2 drugs, we're looking at morphine, PCP, cocaine, methadone, Demerol. These are in a different class. We sit down and we actually look at more of these drugs in detail and what their purpose and use is. But essentially what I need you to understand for this class is that there are 5 schedules. Schedule 1 is the worst, and Schedule 5 is I hate to say least worst, but it's really the lowest, and they look at the potential for abuse. But one of the little notes that I want you to take from this is that marijuana is still currently a Schedule 1 drug. This slide just looks at the criminal offenses here, as we were talking about possession of a controlled substance, manufacture or distribution of a controlled substance, or possession with intent to deliver a controlled substance. And then agreements to deliver a controlled substance, even if the substance delivered is a simulation or a counterfeit drug. So there are different drugs that are simulated, and meaning that they're not like marijuana. They are created. So like I think K2 would be an example of this for you. But anyway, these are the drug offenses, and these are the most common drug offenses that you're going to see under the CSA, or the Controlled Substance Act. This picture here is just showing a meth lab actually that blew up. Meth labs used to be far more common than they are now. They're dangerous, obviously. They blow up, people die, people get really sick from them. And now it's just so much cheaper for people to, and less risky, really. They buy meth instead. Mexico sends a illegal trade, sends a bunch of methamphetamine across the border, and then it's then distributed out throughout the country. So many people who used to own meth labs or would operate meth labs are now just getting their meth from Mexico. Possession. In the federal act, meaning the Controlled Substance Act, and in most states, possession is only a crime if done knowingly. So you have to know that you're in possession. A few states have deleted the knowingly requirement, thus eliminating the mens rea in drug offenses. A few states have taken that out, meaning that you don't have to be aware of your possession, but still the majority do. Most courts follow the deliberate ignorance rule, which holds that one who consciously chooses to ignore the nature of material in his possession has knowingly violated the law. So let's say that you're driving your friend's vehicle and, there's a kilo of cocaine, I don't know. And they're saying, I didn't know it was in there. Well, they're saying, if you took possession of that vehicle, that ignorance rule, you were choosing to ignore what was in that vehicle, and therefore you're responsible for it. Let's see, what else do you need to know? Usable quantity. This is important for you to know. Usable quantity. And what's a usable amount is whenever you're looking at trace amounts, and we've talked about this in criminal investigations, trace amounts and usable amounts, there's a fine line between the two. Typically for a drug conviction, you have to have a usable amount. So if there's just a very small unusable portion of the drug remaining, which might be like on a dollar bill or maybe a scale, in many cases it cannot get a conviction because it's not a usable amount. Drug paraphernalia. This is always kind of a hot topic, but drug paraphernalia is really just anything that is used to sell or manufacture or use your drugs. One of the things that is easily identified as drug paraphernalia is a bong, needles, scales, all of those things. Let's see, what other examples do they give? That's about all I can come up with off of this slide. But anyway, if paraphernalia has only a use with illegal drugs, like a single-use possession or sale, is a violation even though the defendant did not have specific intent. So the easiest way I can explain all of this is that like a syringe, a needle, something like that, if you have that in your possession, that's drug paraphernalia and you can be charged for having them. Marijuana. As we were talking about a minute ago, marijuana, a pipe. A pipe is a type of paraphernalia. Let me get to the next page here. Alone among the Schedule I drugs, marijuana is regarded by some as having a recognized medical use. And keep in mind that this textbook is a few years old, so it doesn't reflect some of the changes in the marijuana laws, that have happened in the past few years. A few states have legalized medical use of marijuana so long as it is used pursuant to a valid prescription, which is what we're looking at here in Missouri. You go to your doctor, you get a medical marijuana card, and then you go to a dispensary and you can buy legal medical grade marijuana. While the federal government may prosecute persons in possession of marijuana within the states who have a medical use exception, it has signaled it won't do so. Federal law always supersedes state law. So what that means is if you're walking down the street and in Colorado and you are openly smoking a joint, a Colorado state trooper who was employed by the state would not and could not arrest you. However, on that same street you walk past a federal DEA agent, they could arrest you because they are enforcing federal law where the state cop is enforcing state law. However, the federal government has said that it would not prosecute or arrest individuals who are within their states and following their state law. Thereafter, the large-scale drug trade, not the individual use person here. But it does say states making marijuana legal will not protect users from federal prosecution under federal law. Controlled substances may have been used in religious ceremonies. We're not really going to spend too much time on that, so let's just skip over this slide. Drug-induced deaths. If you, and I say you, but just like a person, has died and you were the one who provided those drugs to them, you can be held responsible for it. It happens it takes a few different shapes and forms here. Let's say that you have a party and somebody leaves your party and ends up, driving intoxicated and hits a family and kills them. That you could be held responsible for the party, for allowing the person to leave. The felony murder rule can come in. It's not a clear area. It's a lot of gray and a lot of decisions that are made by the courts in the time. But if you have some part in the drug-induced death, you can be held criminally and financially responsible in some cases. Alcohol. Alcohol is the most widely used drug in the United States. First off, because it's not illegal, but secondly, it's accessible. Every state has many criminal laws aimed at the unauthorized possession of or sale of alcohol, typically by or to minors. You may see it often. We do undercover, we run undercover buys around here all the time, meaning that they have somebody who looks like a minor or could be a minor walk in, try and buy alcohol to test that person who's working. Did they ask for their ID? Did they check? Did they blah, blah, blah? Did they try to sell to a minor? And if so, that place of employment or that business can lose their liquor license, meaning they can no longer sell alcohol, which obviously can hurt their business pretty significantly. Drunk driving prosecutions remain the most common alcohol-related crime. So what I want you to understand here is, first off, almost 50 people a day are killed by drunk driving. About 1 million people are hurt annually from drunk driving. Most states have an increased penalty for a conviction based on a blood alcohol count. So what that means is the higher your blood alcohol count, the higher the punishment or the higher the crime. Also, the more times that you are found to be driving intoxicated, the penalty increases. So, you might see what says drunk driving or driving under the influence, repeat offender. What that means is it's not their first time, and every time after that, the punishment gets more and more. That's how I legitimately had women on my caseload in the Chillicothe Correctional Center who were there solely because of driving while intoxicated. Now, let me tell you, they may have had 8 different DWIs, but you will go to prison for DWIs. People don't think that sometimes. A couple more things. I wanted to go back real quick and tell you when we were talking about drug-induced death and being punished. So the state must show that only the defendant provided the drugs to the victim and that the victim died as a proximate result of the defendant's actions. That means no other intervening event must have caused the death. So let's say that if somebody gave their friend meth, and I can tell you a real life example of this. Woman gives her nephew methamphetamine, he shoots it up and he literally dies right there in front of her, dead. Stopped his heart, just done, killed him right then. She was in prison for causing the death of her nephew because he was alive, he stuck the needle in his arm, he shot up, and he died right then. Her giving him the drugs, that was proximate cause, and there was nothing intervening between him and his causing his death other than him shooting the methamphetamine that she had cooked and distributed and given to him.